uh, quite satisfying, really. It's not the way most people work. And then a lot of the illustrations I've done were taken on to be used by way of second rights in Germany and places like that. So, quite honestly, I don't know how many I've done that have been used, but they do crop up all the time. I know it's quite a considerable amount.
What was it that inspired you to get? Or what was it inspired you about Michael Moorcock in the first place? Like, take us a little bit back to that, back in
Well,
time to that first
yeah,
moment.
it was. I've read Tolkien, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and I did sort of um, find the Silmarillion a bit difficult, but I made illustrations for a lot of those and test pieces. And I'm talking to a friend of mine who was a big Moorcock fan, and I said, oh, well, I've ripped through most of the Tolkien stuff that I can find. Um, where do I go from here? And he said, well, it's obviously Michael Moorcock. And he took me into a room and showed me these shelves groaning with the weight of all these Moorcock paperbacks. And he grabbed a handful and said, go and have a, go try these, which I did. And as I read, um, I discovered that Michael is a man with, um, he's like um, the sort of counterpart to the illustrator because um, his ideas, rather than coming out in two-dimensional as an image, they come out in the text of the book. And he's amazingly sort of forthcoming with all these different fantastic ideas that suit my style perfectly. And so as soon as I started reading it, I thought, oh, that would make a good illustration. Or, I like this bloke with the red eyes that gets about the place on a dragon. And soon I became utterly captivated by it. And, I read every Moorcock book that this friend of mine had and then started looking elsewhere. Um, and ultimately plucked up the courage to approach Michael with, to show him my work and see where. And yeah, he was very good. He immediately said, "I
Yeah.
like this stuff. I'm gonna promote it. I'm gonna put it on my books, and we'll see what I can do." It was great.
And of course, you two, you're both into rock music, weren't you?
Yeah, Mike was very, well, probably still is familiar with Hawkwind and climbed on stage with them many times. He I played with him quite a lot. He read poetry and sang, and he did an album of his own. So he's very musically directed anyway.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
as for me, at art college, I did a couple of years in the West of England College of Art in Bristol, and I noticed there that a lot of the artists, the illustrators, the students also came in the morning clutching guitars and records and things to play in the common room. Um,
Yeah.
and I was already into that sort of stuff at home via my dad's old drum kit and my little record player. So it came quite naturally to pursue both avenues. The music thing, I'm still doing music now, but there was a yawning gap in the middle of my musical career in favour of the artwork. The artwork cancelled out the music for quite a long time.
Mm,
But it's
mm.
never gone away. The two things are very complementary. And of course, when I started doing the Moorcock things in the 70s, I was also uh, sort of organising a rock band. It was a proggy thing at that time, and the two things fitted really well. Um, it was also other types of music I did. My dad played in a dance band, and so his jazz records are hanging around the place. So I did take lessons from a jazz drummer, and incorporated those sort of rudiments into the music that my prog band, as it ended up being. Um, but in 1974, I think it was, I approached Big O, the poster company in London, who were also publishing books and things like that at that time. And they took me on and started selling the images. Some of them here that you've got to drop here in great quantities to my great pleasure. And so the musical side of my aspirations seemed to fall aside for a while. And but now, as I said, I'm doing music. I've got an album,
and of course, I've got a little video of you here. You've also been designing some stuff for video games, right?
Yeah. I've done quite a bit of that there's a logo for John Burton, who's the man who started the Traveller's Tales. He's the proprietor of that company, Traveller's Tales game developer. This was a recent enterprise of his, Game Hut, and he wanted a logo along the lines of my original Traveller's Tales logo. We've worked for quite a few games companies doing them, mostly black and white pencil sketches, so that their artists can get inspiration and
so
legalize plagiarism, really.
Well, it's good to hear you doing that, because a lot of artists can be, and authors of books as well, especially, can be very, very protective over their medium, and they don't want to branch out or embrace technology. There's that constant push and pull of tradition versus innovation, and I think what you're doing. That's why what you're doing with NFTs is so exciting, because it's a controversial space. I mean, there is very polarized opinions about it. Anyone who steps into this space now receives a fair amount of backlash, but it's that belief, and it's the confidence and the belief to push forward with something so early on, and I want to commend you on that, and just get your thoughts on how that process for you happened in your mind.
Well, yes, it's certainly technology for me. I'm getting on in years, so technology doesn't come easy. In the day I started illustration, the most technical thing about what I did was the airbrush, compressor, which is under my desk to this time. And I've worked in various different styles, but very little in the way of technology about it. And then it was, I suppose, first brush with, excuse the pun, with technology was probably the 3D drawings. I had to do 3D angled drawings so that 3D artists could make up characters and things like that. So it all went into a computer, and as if by magic came out as a moving creature that you could see up from all. And I find that really very encouraging, and because my big influence in art was, apart from Alfred Rackham, was Walt Disney, and
really
two-dimensional things that he did absolutely captivated me. And as a small child, I tried to copy that sort of thing, and as the years rolled on, and 3D came along, computer games, and the special effects in films, and I did some work with Jerry Anderson, that stop motion children's series, 26 episodes, and the basic thing was stop motion, as I said, but which is not particularly technical. But for the first time, I became familiar with the way that was meshed with CG animation. So you get a stop motion figure doing things, and in the background, a spacecraft would go past and turn and do things in 3D CG animation. So that was also quite exciting. Then, we've gone on. I've done recently an animation. I just showed a little bit there with my Endor project, which has been great. We've won loads of awards. Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, that's the fantastic thing, isn't it? That new technologies are giving new life and also bringing it to new audience that have already adapted to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these designs here were done in 1973, and just as the the off chance that I might get a publisher to publish a book, and as you can see that we were talking away there about the project. Sarah and me work together, my wife, and she's also involved in the artistic process of all this stuff. And even though this is not sort of hugely animated to a great degree, I just find it's a good stepping stone from this on to the NFTs, because the NFTs are very subtle. Nevertheless, they're I find it very interesting to have my images move. And when I go back and think about it, it's not surprising that I'm excited about this, because after seeing Disney as a child, all I wanted to do was draw his stuff, but of course it didn't move until many years later.
Yeah.
I'm still hoping for more, but we've done a lot of stuff ourselves. I've had spectacular sort of dismissals and refusals from film studios in my life, and one or two people that were very kind to me, such as there goes the dog, Jerry Anderson, and primarily Jerry Anderson, and various people who did actually want to work with me, but it didn't come to anything. Jim Henson as a friend, so in the long run, this Endor thing that we just discussed was just something that seemed to come along almost by accident. But what it's done is it's introduced me again to my great wish to be involved in animation.
Great.
We've done it all ourselves, which is crazy.
You have. That's another amazing thing. Is like these are actually animated by you. So that's another really exclusive part of the project.
Just not to get a misunderstanding, the NFTs were animated under our instruction by an animator, because I don't
under your instruction. Sorry,
yeah. A computer for me is something you keep the door open with, but you have to sort of direct the thing and say, no, this animation here is too violent. I don't want him whisking this blade across the screen. I just want a gentle, a subtle sort of intimidating movement of the eyes and maybe the hand. And
so let's talk a little bit about the artworks themselves then, because I want to get stuck into the exciting part of the evening. So everyone knows that you've got 7 artworks here.
That's right.
6 are animated. 1 is a still. They are all going for different prices, and there are different levels of exclusivity. So at the top end, we've got and we have the auction piece, of course. This
one here is the auction piece I got.
So tell us go ahead.
Okay. This one is the album cover for Nazareth. I think it was 1979. 1978, the artwork was done for a 79 release. I'm not quite sure. But it was called No Mean City. And the image was based on a book called No Mean City, which involved characters in a situation with the razor gangs in Glasgow during the 30s, 20s, 30s, etc. And the character there is actually being named by the band as Friendly Fred. But when the band had seen my, strangely enough, a Michael Moorcock calendar in Switzerland where they were recording some stuff, working on it, someone got in touch with me and said, we've seen this calendar of yours and we'd like you to do an album cover. And they explained about, the inspiration behind it was gang warfare and, the sort of things that go on in back alleys. And I said, well, I don't. I'm not an artist of natural scenes. I don't draw natural figures. I don't do natural street
Yeah.
scenes or landscapes. I'm a fantasy artist. And he said, well, we understand that, but we want something symbolic or, of this sort of type of way of doing things. And so I scribbled out some stuff, and this was Nazareth. The band were a Scottish band, but they were living in the Isle of Man at that time, and they flew me up to the Isle of Man from Bristol, and it was in an old Vickers Viscount, a turboprop little plane that was very rickety, and I wondered whether I'd get there at all, and to discuss exactly what they wanted, and presumably approve my ideas for the thing. And I landed at this little airport, and this guy came up from the band, and he sort of drove me some miles across the Isle of Man to a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And as was my habit in those days, I drank rather too much draft Guinness the night before, and he had this abysmal hangover, and it was a hot day, and he had this little sports car, and we drove around these lanes, and of course I started to feel really quite
sick,
really sickly. I managed to, not to sort of soil his foot well, but we got to the place and we discussed the job, and I remember the band standing around me like some sort of inquisition, and eventually they said, well, yes, this is great, that's the one, that's what we'll have. And I got whisked back to the airport, and it always puzzled me over the years who it was that drove me and what the car was. And and I met Pete Agnew, who the bass player, who's actually the only standing member of the original band, or the one performing member, at an exhibition I did at Metropolis Studio in Chiswick in London. Lovely place, big place, where they were doing this show being shot for DVD, and I said to him about my experiences on the Isle of Man. I said, I've always wondered who it was picked me up and what sort of car it was, and I've been wrestling with it ever since. He said, oh, that was me, and it was a Morgan. So I was able to put
it was a Morgan, classic car, yeah.
So
this image, though, I remember you telling me that it's gained sort of a cult status with truckers and bikers, particularly in the States. I mean,
time of the when the album was released, I noticed that a lot of the trucks, the custom painted trucks and cars and bikes, and that featured Friendly Fred and the Rat, painted on them. And then years later, when my son was interested in American cars and trucks, and that, I know they're still doing it now. No money's ever changed hands, but it's just interesting that this is a thing in America. People seem to like it on their vehicles. So yeah, it's the sort of thing I don't.
It's great.
It's great. Before anybody asks, I don't like that sort of paint, but yeah, that's what happened.
Well, it's a beautiful piece, Rodney, and there's so much depth to it, and the fact that it's got this iconic status beyond the album itself is really something. And for everyone watching, this piece, No Mean City, is our hero of this evening's drop, and in 35 minutes it will be going to auction. It's got a reserve price of $5,000. That's where it's starting, but it is a one of one. So if you're the winning bidder, you'll be the only owner of this piece of art with your blockchain certified NFT. So
yeah,
that's great. Let's move on and have a look at the ones that are selling for fixed prices. I've got the next one here. Just bear with me. Here we go. Let's now take a look at. Actually, let's do this in order. It's probably better. We got No Mean City. Yeah, let's have a look at Encore at the End of Time.
Right. Okay.
So, what can you tell us about this one, Rodney?
Well, it's a Michael Moorcock influence piece. For the book I described earlier on, Elric at the End of Time. Elric is one of his best known and loved characters. This is the one of the illustrations from that I did in this sort of way in which Michael Moorcock allowed me to make suggestions as to what could go in the book. And knowing that he performed with Hawkwind, I suggested that he write a band into it somewhere and performing, and on a stage in some alien landscape, which he did. And so, if you're a Hawkwind fan, you'll know that the whole thing is actually it's not actually created to look like Hawkwind specifically, but it's got the flavour of the band, and that is all I really wanted. It's been very popular over the years. It is quite a big piece of artwork, and if you're up for another anecdote, at the time I did this artwork, I mean, it's the image itself is what is it, 70 by 100 centimeters, and plus a couple of inches of border. I work in inches usually, but that makes it's quite a big piece. And during the time I worked on this, I was in I had a studio at the offices of Big O, which is then in Gloucester in the southwest of England, but I lived in North Somerset, so it was about 30 or 40 miles I had to travel up there, and I stayed there working throughout the week and then went home the weekend. And the only means of transport I had at the time was a little Caterham Super 7, which is a derivative of the Lotus 7, a tiny little car, a cockpit that you couldn't swing a mouse around in. But I had this big piece of artwork to take along. So rather than risk bending it inside or putting it on the roof above my head, I pulled the back spare wheel forward and put it down behind there and then strapped the whole thing in. And I had to drive up the motorway, the M5, and at a fair tilt. And this artwork was in the back, flapping about. Miraculously, it survived. I still got it. It's still in good condition. I enjoyed working on it.
Yeah, it's good. And the art style, I meant to ask you earlier about your art style, Rodney, because I mean, Michael Moorcock stuff, for example, could have been represented in so many ways, but the way you draw the curves and the lines, the tonality, the kind of the simple palettes that you use to create this otherworldly sense of being. Is that something like how long has that been developing? Did you always draw like that? Tell me a little bit about that journey and the way that you draw.
Different styles to work in, because in the 60s I worked in an advertising agency.
Okay.
And they would shout for a different style every now and again, and I had to be able to do it. This style is something that I remember doing quite a bit of that type of sweeping lines with spiky bits. I describe it as such at art college, and drawing, plant drawing in particular. And I was taught by Anthony Rossiter, who was a quite well-known painter of Somerset landscapes. Great teacher, late Anthony Rossiter. So I was familiar with that style right the way a long time ago. But then there was this gap between that and the advertising work, which led me into all different sorts of styles, to sort of please the customer's brief. When I finally did get back to this sort of thing, I found that it was in vogue and fitted the sort of stuff that I was doing in that time, the record covers and things. And I think just to describe this process, the color schemes are always in my art, are mostly always around one key color, and then everything else has got a little bit of that same color in. But I don't like putting, I'm not a kitchen sink artist where I throw in a lot of raw colors together. I always use one mood, one key color to create a mood. And not to spoil it by putting really colors that don't complement the general sort of environment. And I got that from Walt Disney, and I found that his animations were generally speaking around using a particular color to create a mood for a series of frames in a film. And I've kept that as a sort of way of working ever since. Most of my, this one is blue key color. There's no bright red in it or anything that is really contrary to that general color expectation.
Yeah, no, it definitely is very striking.
Is that also, going back to that band there, a lot of my stuff is tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of sort of whimsy about the whole thing. And that has its roots in the cartoons and things I did in advertising. So nothing of these early pictures was exactly sort of serious. There was always something a little bit funny, or I don't know. I'm looking at the Storyteller's Night at the moment. It's obviously quite a lot of fun in that one, and even something like Elric and the Dragons. There's always this little slight suggestion towards humour in it somewhere. Or I see it that way anyway. Does that answer your question about the encore?
Yeah, no, it does.
That encore one, there's a bottle of Johnny Walker, I think it was, a whiskey that I drank while I did the job, to sort of round off the sort of the feelings of I don't know. I was going through a bad patch at the time, and I found it very therapeutic.
Nothing helps a bad patch like Johnny Walker.
That's right. That's what I've always said. It's
right. Let's have a look at one of the other pieces. Not that one for now. Hang on. We'll go with. So we've looked at No Mean City. We've looked at Encore at the end of the time. I guess it's time to have a look at the pale albino himself.
Right.
The Dragon Lord. Let me share that one here. Sorry, bear with me a second. Coming up now. So Elric. Like, what is it that fascinates you about Elric?
He's an anti-hero. So I imagine in the way I've read the books. But you get attached to, you get to like him despite his, fact that he cleaves skulls all the way through the stories and sends, that he's got this sword, which is Stormbringer. And it not only slays people, but steals their souls at the same time, which is pretty horrific. So there's a double sort of horror about the whole thing. He's unusual. He's very slim for a warrior, and people said that to me. They said, we think you've captured, including Michael himself. He said, we think you've caught the character, Elric. As this slim warrior. So many people put these great muscular blokes with. Frank Frazetta and people like that to great effect. I mean, he's brilliant. Yeah. But I think I I must have seen Elric as a slim character. He's a sort of warrior, sorcerer, lives a rather sad life in a sort of a way, but gets up all sorts of adventures. And I also like dragons, illustrating dragons along the lines of what I know of the natural equivalents. The snake, serpents, lizards, bat wings, and stuff like that. I find it good fun trying to sort of fit a natural creature or several natural creatures into one fantastical creature. And that is the sort of work that I find quite easy. I don't struggle much over that type of illustration.
Sort of blending different creatures together and sort of creating, because a lot.
Yeah, the dragon he's sitting on is called Flame Fang, and I've done some. This was from the 70s. It was 1976. But recently I've done illustrations for a new book called Stormbringer, which is basically the sword.
So Stormbringer is his sword, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what's fascinating, because for a lot of your audience know that the figure of Elric has inspired so many variations that are iconic in modern fantasy today, like Anamanda Rake in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, who's got a sword Dragnipper that swallows the souls, and he's an albino and he's got long white hair, and Geralt of Rivia, the lithe swordsman in The Witcher, long hair. These kind of, and they're always tragic figures. They're like Elric is. He's got this tragic, an outsider, cursed by his own super abilities in a way. And
that sounds a little bit like they've been over influenced. I think this was Michael Moorcock's version. I think it was the original of that sort of
absolutely.
And
I mean, Moorcock influenced so much in like, he's really flown under the radar. But if, for instance, if you go into Warhammer and the Games Workshop franchises, they're everything from the symbol of chaos, the 8-pointed star, to the concept of the chaos beings, of these ethereal consciousness, and even the I think in Warhammer you've got blood for the blood god, and there's something very similar that Moorcock uses, and they, it's all crept into that world in ways that are not promoted and publicized the same way Tolkien is.
Yeah, I think you can let people get away with a bit of influence there. The weird thing is that Michael Moorcock is, when I first met him, he was living in London. And I had to go and meet him over some artwork one day. And so I found his house and rapped on the door. And I expected to be greeted by this ogre, or at least this version of Elric, with a great sword and the dragon helmet and the black armor and what have you. And there's this tall man, bit sort of larger around than Elric, wearing a red dressing gown and a pair of football socks. Sniveling and apologised that he had a nasty case of flu, but rather than cancel the meeting, he'd just keep away from me as we talked, and would that suffice? And I said, sure, because this bloke was a hero, still is. And most people wouldn't do that, and he's such a kind, considerate. I don't want to go too far down this road. I haven't seen him for many years, but he was to me. It was quite a relief to find out that he was so compassionate,
approachable.
Approachable is the very word.
I mean, I do find it fascinating how someone's text and the worlds that they create. And so, you'd never know that some people created those worlds, as you say, Moorcock, really nice, compassionate, approachable guy, but his worlds they're dark and and they're cynical.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tragedy in it. But I think that's the beauty of it, and that I think is what translates so nicely into your artwork.
Yeah. At the same time, I have to say again that it's rich in amazing ideas that have since been used widespread by quite a lot of people. But yeah, and can't speak highly enough of Mike Moorcock.
Good. All right, let's move on to another piece here. Let's have a look at Tanalon. Give me a second. Here we go. Yeah, so this is a very serene and otherworldly landscape. How did you settle on this?
Well, first of all, I'll say as a poster, which is what the artwork was done for, it sold really well, as did the Dragon Lord. The colour scheme is like I outlined before, is around the blue end of the spectrum, cold scene, even though it's a desert. But I decided on the blue because I wanted to reflect what I felt at Tanalon was just ethereal city that would come and go and in various locations, and in essence was a place for weary travellers to recharge. And that in itself is not a new idea, but I think Moorcock used it in quite a few of his books and stories, the Eternal Champion series, as you probably know, to great effect. And yeah, quite.
Your dog agrees.
He knows all these things. Yeah, I'm looking at my little notes here because I remember thinking at the time that I've been working on things quite similar myself, and one of the things was I used to write the lyrics for my band, and in the early 70s, I'd written a song called Lavender Castle, and it was about this city, not similar to that one, but it existed in space, and it came and went, and you know, it was a sort of thing that represented peace and tranquility, and always turned up like the cavalry at the right time for those in need. And that was the Lavender Castle song went on to be the basis of the series I did with Jerry Anderson, and many years later, and you know, the lyrics popped into my head, the lyrics of the tune, when I was sitting down to design this series. I'm not saying that Moorcock influenced me there with Tanalon, but by some strange chance, it came along at a very similar time. I think we were both on the same wavelength.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, it is definitely a product of that era. You know, when you did the Wizardry and Wild Romance calendar. But it has been reused for Asia's one of their albums, hasn't it? Like much later.
Well, by way of second rights, yes, it's been used here and there. It's been quite well used, but it's still very popular. And I'm thinking that also to go back a couple of steps, if you think of Tolkien as well as one of my great heroes, Rivendell, similar thing, a place of refuge and sort of a sanctuary in an evil world, and also Tolkien's houses of healing, and then going to the little Endor story that I sort of wrote with Graham Smith back in 1973. There's this Golden Palace that has a similar theme to it, and this which is carried on into the recent animation, where the city sort of comes from nowhere, like a mirage.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. The idea of moving castles as well, and they're there one minute, they're not, they're in other dimensions, like
Yeah,
the moving palace in that that castle in classic 80s movie Kroll, where the Beast's
yeah,
castle moves, or
yeah,
modern day Castlevania where the castle moves. And it's that kind of epic, unreal scale that fantasy has always offered us.
yeah. Fantasy fodder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right, let's sorry, Rodney. Just
sorry,
I'm conscious of the time.
right, we'll move on if we've got time for another one.
We've got time for three more, I think, if
Right.
we're brief. So let's have a look at which is many people's favourite, as I can tell from the comments, on a Storyteller's Night.
Yeah. Magnum. That was an album cover.
Another Magnum album cover. Yeah.
Yeah. When you actually see the NFT, you find that we've got a fully drawn pencil sketch that transforms into the full color piece. It was a front cover, so it's obviously square. Here we are.
Here we go.
And the thinking behind this, I mean, Tony Clarkin, the bloke who runs a band, he said that his theme for this thing was to do with storytelling, and could he have someone sort of telling a story to some people? It was all a bit vague, but sitting down, telling this sort of fairly abysmal story to these onlookers, and so, I mean, my first idea was to put it in a pub. And one of the pubs that I've been into a couple of times was a George at Norton St. Philip I think in Somerset, near where I used to live years ago. And it is very ancient. And this is not a direct copy of anything inside. It's just the feeling is very much the same. I wanted it to look old and atmospheric. And so I really like drawing little goblins and characters like that. So I populated the scene with these characters that were not actually human. And the only thing that is very realistic there, probably the mice on the brow there, but also my dog Patch was under the table.
Yeah.
Lighting up the scene. When it comes to the animation of this thing, there's some very subtle movements that make it even more spooky. I'll leave you to see that. But the storyteller is central to the thing, although we don't see his face.
That's something I really like about this, that the storyteller is implied.
I think that is a part of the charm of the thing, if there is some. But I imagine he's telling this story that they're really freaking them out, and if you were to be able to see his face, it probably changes into something quite sinister, and flashes into a horrible shape to add emphasis to the story, and at which point you snapped a shot of it and seen their faces, and they're all petrified, apart from the dog, who's seen it all
apart
before.
From the dog, yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. I know. I really do love this one. Okay, let's have a look at one more. We've got two more to go actually. This next one is Aqua.
Yeah.
So here's this is an Asia album cover again, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I can't remember which album it was. I'm looking through my little list I've got here. For some reason, I've left it off. Great. It was like a theme that Jeff Downes pointed out that had to do with water, because the tune that it was based on was going to be used in some film about the preservation of the waterways of the earth. So I can't remember exactly what it was, but he said, I need a spacey sort of feel to it, but at the same time, which is what Asia design was all about, with the very accomplished designs of Roger Dean. He wanted a spacey feel, but at the same time a sort of a watery feel. So this planet here is made out of water. The dolphins, there's a sort of a paradox there. You're not quite sure whether the dolphins are underwater or in space. And the machine has obviously seen better days. It's like almost like the natural forms of the world are still here in the shape of the dolphins, but the things that mankind made, they wear out, and it's a big war machine. Eventually becomes obsolete and rots away. So it's like a comment on my love for the natural world.
Yeah, I mean that is such that contrast there between the organic and the mechanical. It's that kind of holding up mankind's hubris in an endless pursuit of technology and war, and how it is just fleeting, and eventually everything turns to scrap.
In its own time, it goes back into the soil. So well, all the great things of the world just continue.
That's true. Right, now we come.
Serpent's Kiss.
The Serpent's Kiss, yeah. I know. I love what you guys were saying about this one. It's a very symbolic picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit like a sort of poke at. Well, actually, I'll tell you the brief, which is it was for Paul May. He's a guitarist, and it's a project called the Atkins May Project. Al Atkins was the original singer, and I think he's probably the founder of Judas Priest, the band Judas Priest. But Paul May and him were working together. They're sort of a metal band, and I know Paul quite well. And he said, I need something based on betrayal. It's almost like the theme of Judas Iscariot accepting 30 pieces of silver to betray Christ. And it sort of, and I said, same thing. I said, I don't like drawing ordinary people with handfuls of 30 pieces of silver dressed in Middle Eastern gowns and things. That's not where I am. I do something that represents your feelings about that, or my feelings as well, which is why it's ended up to be this thing, which is basically another Bible thought here. And I've written this down there. How does it benefit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And at that time I did this job, there was a lot of fuss and bother with the banks, that they were ripping people off, and they were doing all sorts of dodgy things, and then going out of business. People were losing their money. And it struck me that money had become not only the motivation of people at the expense of others, but it was almost like it became the god of the world. And so this is like a thing of worship up here. It's a pound sign.
Yeah,
it's like what the financial district of London, which I notice has changed a bit since then. Sort of ill-shaped buildings going up there hand over fist as we speak. But it was as much as to say this money can, at its worst, give you a lot of power, and the banks seem to be manipulating and basically deceiving people. I think they probably still are, but I had a thing about that, and so I managed to get this design accepted on the basis that it was similar in that there was a theme of betrayal.
Yeah. And and I remember Sarah saying to me this kind of thing, like one ring to rule them all, if you like. There's this overarching malignant force.
It's also something in my mind at the time. The Lord of the Rings, there's a little thing about so many rings for this, you know the bit, and it ended up with one ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them, or words to that effect. I don't know what it. I can't remember what it says exactly. But it was this thing about, the value of the ring. And the value of great wealth is it can be used for good, but in the worst circumstances, it can be used to do a lot of harm. And, I mean, we'd all like to be rich, but thankfully, I'm not in that category. So I can say these sort of things without being too much of a hypocrite.
No, it's good. I mean, it brings it all up to date, and the themes that you're developing and the way that you're looking at the world is very much alive and very much in touch with culture, but there is that timeless element to all your work, and I think that's what makes it so desirable is the depth of that context and the journey from the idea to the final product, through the influences, whether it's a rock band, whether it's Michael Moorcock, and then your own personality and your own view of the world on it. So well done, Rodney. I mean, this is not only a brave first move.
You're very kind, sir.
I think now it's just we just want to see what happens when it's out there, right?
Yeah, let the thing rip, and we'll take it as it
comes.
comes.
The good news is that it appears to all be live now. I am going to stick I'm just going to test this link here, and if I'm right, yeah. So I'm going to put it in the chat. There we go. So people head over to Terra Virtua and on the marketplace in a couple of minutes, or click the link that I've just posted in the comments below. That will take you to Rodney's page on our site. That also means that the No Mean City one will be up very, very shortly as an auction. I think that's the link, but I think as soon as we hit 5 o'clock, those will all be live to buy. Yeah, very, very exciting time.
Yeah, it's exciting for me. First time with this. I hope people enjoy looking at these things and imagining their own. I think I invite people to look at my pictures and make what they will of them. I mean, because it might mean to some people that it's different from me. But yeah, enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. All right, Rodney. Well, thank you ever so much. It's been highly informative and wonderful speaking to you.
And you, sir.
We'll touch base soon. And goodbye to everyone who's watching. Head over to Terra Virtua in a couple of minutes to pick them up. And stay tuned for more.
Yeah, bye.